He was behind glass when she dropped to her knees. The kind of glass that separates titans from the rest of the world. Thick, tall, flawless. Like him, Selene didn't care. Her breath hitched as her knees smacked the polished floor. Her dress, wet, clinging, was half torn from being yanked back by security outside. Her voice cracked, raw and shaking. They took my daughters. Inside the boardroom, Cairo Ashford stood still, tall, tailored, untouched by time. His expression didn't shift. If anything, there was a flicker of something that passed too fast to name. He took a step forward, his voice calm. "Your daughters." She met his eyes, green locked onto gray. Her chest heaved, her soul exposed. "Our daughters, Cairo," a beat passed. And then, he laughed, not loud, not cruel. Worse, it was hollow, like something inside him was already gone. Before we uncover what Cairo does next, if your heart is already gripped by this moment, take 1 second to like this video, drop your thoughts in the comments, and subscribe to Mr. Ross Story Trail. These stories stay with you. She didn't move. She just stared at him, as if trying to remember the man she once gave her whole body to, the one who held her in silence, as she cried over her dying father. The one who used to kiss the scars on her back and swear he'd never add to them. That man wasn't in the room anymore. "I came because I had no one else," she whispered. Cairo's jaw tightened. He turned his back, as if that might undo her presence. As if 5 years could be erased like data off a drive. He disappeared. No call, no letter. "I was pregnant. Silence. I had to protect them. From your world, from your silence." His hand curled into a fist by his side. She saw it, and still, he said nothing. She stood slowly, dignity reclaimed even in heartbreak. "I came here as their mother," she said, her voice breaking. "But you're their father." And with that, she turned. The automatic doors slid shut behind her. She didn't cry again until the elevator began its slow descent. Selene's fingers trembled as she clutched the railing, her body numb from exhaustion. Her knees still ached from the marble floor. Her heart, more than that. She hadn't meant to beg. Not him. Not after the way he let her vanish 5 years and 2 daughters ago. But motherhood changes the kind of pride a woman can afford to keep. Down in the lobby, people stared. She barely saw them. The cold clung to her skin like judgment. But she didn't care. She had given everything she had left. And he laughed. Upstairs, Cairo didn't move. The glass still shimmered with the print of her hands, a smear of rain or maybe tears left where her fingers had trembled. He tried to refocus on the board meeting still playing out on screen, shareholders waiting, slides advancing, a voice in his ear mentioning numbers, markets, mergers. But all he could see were her eyes. Selene Moore, the only woman who ever made him feel anything that wasn't control. The woman who once danced barefoot through his living room at 2 a.m., music barely audible over her laughter. He remembered how she used to fall asleep curled against his chest, how she'd whisper, "I trust you," like it was a vow. He remembered the exact day that trust broke, and he remembered the silence that followed. But today her voice was different, shaky, maternal, terrified. She said, "Daughters." She said, "Ours." His chest tightened. Cairo tapped his smartwatch. "Get me eyes on Selene Moore. Now, because something was wrong, and whether he wanted to believe it or not, he might have just let the mother of his children walk out of his life a second time. Only this time, she wasn't the only one he might lose. Selene folded the last of the tiny socks and set them gently in the drawer. Mira had drawn a butterfly on it with a marker. Lyra had turned hers into a cat. Neither matched, but they were full of life, and that was all that mattered. Her daughters were sleeping, arms tangled, cheeks pressed together like mirrors in motion. 5 years old, and yet their laughter still made her believe in something bigger than struggle. She sat at the foot of the bed and just watched them. In this tiny 2-bedroom apartment in Brooklyn, where the windows whined when wind touched them and the radiator was temperamental at best, this was her peace. Their drawings covered every inch of wall space, stick figures with wide smiles, flowers that floated in the air, stars that didn't care for gravity. They believed anything was possible. Sometimes, Selene needed to believe it too. After tucking the covers around them tighter, she padded into the living room. The clock read 11:46 p.m. She unwrapped her scarf, tied her curls back, and rolled out the mat. Music whispered through her phone's tiny speaker, just enough to guide her muscles. No mirrors, no audience, just motion. Her body remembered. Her body always remembered. She danced not for applause now, but to stay sane. She moved like breath, every motion a message, arms carving silence, legs remembering stages she once lit up, ankles wrapped in worn ribbon. This was how she prayed. There had been a time when the world called her exquisite, when photographers begged for shots and choreographers begged for her trust. That world was long gone. She stopped moving when a wave of heat pushed behind her eyes. Tears threatened to steal her balance. She collapsed to the mat and curled inward. Not tonight. Not when rent was due. Not when Lyra had asked for new shoes. Not when Mira needed help with counting past 30. Selene wiped her face and whispered, "You have no choice but to keep going." Her daughters needed her to be more than memory. They needed her present. She had only agreed to perform that night because her studio needed the funding. The event was opulent. Too many lights, too many eyes. But she stepped onto that platform anyway, barefoot, wrapped in soft silk, carrying nothing but discipline and grace. The music began. Her body moved like instinct. Every turn, every breath, every lift of her arms told a story no one had asked her to share, but everyone listened. Everyone, except one. She felt his gaze before she saw him. While others sipped champagne and whispered over hors d'oeuvres, he stood still, watching only her. No expression, no interruption. Selene's heart stuttered. After the music faded and the applause melted into background chatter, she slipped off the stage and ducked behind a partition to breathe. She was reaching for her coat when a voice spoke behind her. "You danced like you were trying to forget something." She turned. There he was, taller than she expected. Impeccable suit, crisp tie, but it was his eyes that unsettled her. They were unreadable, cool, but not empty, like he knew something about endings. "Maybe I was," she replied, unsure why she didn't walk away. He didn't smile, not fully, but something in his face shifted. "I'm Cairo," he said. "I know who you are." He tilted his head. "And you're not impressed. I'm not sure you're real." That made him pause. "What makes you say that?" She shrugged. "People like you don't usually talk to people like me. They sponsor our shows. They don't step into them." He stepped closer. "Maybe I was trying to remember something. That night they didn't sleep. Not out of lust, out of curiosity. Two strangers, one sculpted by control, the other by survival, trying to understand what made the other choose loneliness. They talked until dawn, about art, about logic, about absence and addiction and childhood dreams that never made it past the front door. It didn't feel like meeting. It felt like recognizing someone you didn't know you were missing. They became inseparable. For 6 months, Cairo would finish board meetings early just to hear her read Neruda aloud. She would rearrange her rehearsals just to sleep beside him in silence. He, the architect of power. She, the keeper of softness. On a rooftop in Montauk, she once danced for him under the stars, just for him. No stage, no lights. He watched her like her body held answers to questions he'd never asked aloud. She called him beautiful once. He looked away, almost ashamed. "I don't know how to be good at this," he murmured. "You don't have to be good," she said. "Just honest." He kissed her like he believed her. They whispered promises in foreign cities, shared secrets they never told friends, laughed until morning, fought hard, loved harder. Selene gave him everything, until the silence started creeping back in. It began with calls he stopped returning, dinners missed, eyes that no longer looked fully at her. The day it all shifted, she waited outside his building for hours. He never came. That night, his mother came instead. A driver delivered her to a townhouse she'd never seen. Inside, velvet chairs, quiet threat. A woman with a voice like ice and eyes that sliced. "You've had your fun," she said, sliding a check across the table. "Now do what smart girls do. Disappear." Selene stared at the paper. It might have paid her rent for 2 years, but it wouldn't protect her heart. "I'm not for sale," she whispered. The woman leaned forward. "No, dear, you're for disposal." Selene walked out and didn't look back. She expected Cairo to come after her. He didn't. No calls, no letters, no word from him. She laid her palm over her belly and whispered, "It's just you and me now." Except, it wasn't just one. Her body already knew she was carrying 2 hearts inside her. Selene reached the top of the stairs and froze. The front door was ajar. She hadn't left it that way. Her fingers tightened around the grocery bag, keys dangling from her other hand. Something inside her dropped. Slowly she stepped forward. The hinges creaked as she pushed it open fully. Chaos greeted her. The lamp near the window had been shattered. Cushions torn, drawers ripped open. The girls' coloring books were shredded, pages of rainbows and suns scattered across the floor like confetti from a nightmare. "Mira? Lyra?" Her voice cracked. Silence. She dropped the bag. Apples rolled across the floor unnoticed. She rushed to their bedroom, empty. The beds were untouched, their small coats still hung by the door. But they were gone. A sound caught in her throat, something between a gasp and a scream. Her knees gave out. On the kitchen table sat a single slip of paper. No envelope, no signature, just 5 words written in ink that bled slightly into the page. "We warned you. Come alone." Her fingers trembled as she held it. Her vision blurred, but she refused to look away. Not yet. She needed the weight of those words to anchor her, needed them to tell her this wasn't just a nightmare her brain had conjured after a restless night. This was real. Her phone slipped from her fingers as she backed into the wall. The sound of it hitting the tile echoed louder than it should have. She curled into herself, whispering their names over and over. Mira, Lara, Mira, Lara. The police arrived an hour later, a polite knock, uniforms and notepads. She showed them the damage, the note. Her hands shook as she tried to answer their questions. Was there a custody dispute? Could the father be involved? Are you sure they didn't wander off on their own? She wanted to scream. Instead, she showed them the photos. Birthday parties, school pickups, dance rehearsals. Always the 3 of them. Always safe. Always close. The officers exchanged glances. One mentioned no forced entry. The other suggested she wait 24 hours. 24 hours? She was drowning in minutes. They left with clipped promises and generic instructions. She stood in the silence they left behind, surrounded by the fragments of the only world she had built, and the 2 lives that gave hers meaning. And she did the one thing she swore she never would. She picked up her phone, searched for his name, pressed dial. The ringing in her ears wouldn't stop. Selene sat in the middle of the mess, legs folded beneath her, the note still gripped in her hand like it might burn through her skin. Her mind reeled with names, Hammer-in-Chief among them. She hadn't heard from him in years, not until 3 weeks ago. First, it was an email, just a subject line, "Still thinking about you." She blocked it, then a voicemail. His voice, too familiar. Calm, slow. "You should know better than to ignore me." She deleted it, but the shadows grew heavier. She'd seen the black car parked outside her building 3 days ago, a man watching from the sidewalk. One of the twins said someone followed them after preschool. Selene told herself it was paranoia. It wasn't. Amiran had always been about control, not chaos. When they were younger, he called it love. But love doesn't come with bruises and locked doors. He had taken too much from her before. Now he had taken everything. She picked up her phone again and stared at Cairo's number, the man who let her go without a fight, the man who chose silence over her. But this wasn't about her anymore. She thought of Lyra's lopsided braids, Mira's missing front tooth, the way they giggled when they fell asleep holding hands. She pressed the call button. Cairo's voice answered on the 3rd ring. He sounded half distracted. Ashford speaking. "Cairo." A pause, long enough to split her open. "Selene?" Her breath caught. "They're gone." "What?" "Mira and Lyra, someone took them." Silence. There was a note. They said, "Come alone." Longer silence. His voice dropped. "Whose daughters did you say?" She couldn't speak at first. She forced the words out like they weighed more than her chest could carry. "They're yours. They're ours. What would you do if the father of your kids refused to help?" Comment below. And don't forget to subscribe if you haven't yet. We're just getting started. The line went quiet. She listened for a heartbeat, for breath, for anything. But what came instead was laughter. Cold, low, unbelieving. "You disappeared for 5 years, he said finally. "And now you call me because you're out of options?" Selene's eyes brimmed. "Because I'm out of time." He didn't answer. She ended the call and collapsed in the dark. The glass doors of the Ashford International Summit swung wide as Selene pushed past security. She was out of breath, soaked with sweat, heart pounding against her ribs like it was trying to outrun her body. The front desk clerk stood, startled. "Ma'am, I need to see Cairo Ashford." Her voice cracked. "Now, I'm sorry, you'll need an appointment." She stepped forward. "This isn't business." 2 guards flanked her almost instantly. Hands hovered at her elbows, not touching yet, but close enough to warn her. She didn't back down. "My daughters have been taken." Confusion flickered across the assistant's face. People were beginning to stare. One of the guards tilted his head. "Name?" "Selene Moore." He paused. A second later, his eyes widened. Something clicked, not just recognition, memory. The man tapped his earpiece. She can go up. The elevator felt like a confession booth. As she rose, she saw herself in the mirrored panel. hair disheveled, jaw clenched, pain smeared across her features like war paint. She looked like a woman who had already lost everything. The doors opened. Cairo's voice was the first thing she heard, measured, calm, commanding. He stood at the head of a table, discussing something about expansion markets. Polished, unshaken, surrounded by executives and blinking screens, she stepped inside, heads turned. He saw her. The moment stretched. The people in the room vanished from her focus. It was just him now. Cairo. The sound of her voice made his brow twitch, barely. "What are you doing here?" he asked, folding his arms. "My daughters. They're missing." He stared, unmoved. "I need your help." He turned slightly, one brow raised. "Your daughters?" She swallowed hard. "They're yours too. Do you think Cairo was right to react that way? Let me know in the comments below." For a moment, no one breathed. Then Cairo leaned back, slow and sharp, eyes never leaving her, and he laughed. Selene didn't blink. She stood in the center of that boardroom, trembling under the weight of his silence. His laugh still echoed in her ears, not joyful, not cruel, just empty, like he had erased her already. "My daughters were taken from our home," she said again, slower this time. "They're only 5. Cairo tilted his head. "And you waited 5 years to mention them? I was trying to protect them by hiding them from me?" His voice was sharper now. "Do you know how insane this sounds?" She took a step closer. "I didn't come here for a fight. You just dropped a nuclear truth in the middle of my company's flagship summit," he said flatly. "What did you expect? A reunion hug?" Her shoulders sagged, but she didn't back down. "I expected the man who once held my hand while I sobbed in his bed to still have a heart." Cairo's lips parted just barely, but he said nothing. "I begged you for help, Cairo. I don't have power. I don't have reach. I don't even have anyone I can call who won't assume I'm losing my mind." Her hands trembled as she reached into her bag. She pulled out a folded photograph, creased and worn. She laid it on the table in front of him, Mira and Lyra, both smiling, both unmistakable. Their eyes were his. His jaw twitched. Selene stepped back, voice barely audible. "Tell me they don't look like you." The room was so still, someone coughed in the distance and it sounded like thunder. Cairo's gaze locked onto the image, but his voice remained cold. "You should have told me when they were born. I wanted to. I wrote the letter. But your mother found me first. She made it clear what I was to you." His stare sharpened. "You believed her?" She looked me in the eye and said I'd ruin you. He blinked. "And then," she continued, "you stopped calling. You didn't even ask why." The ache in her chest turned sharp, too sharp to hold in any longer. She gathered the photo from the table, slipped it back into her coat pocket with shaking fingers. "I didn't come to beg," she said, voice cracking. "I came to warn you. They're in danger. If you don't want to help, fine. Just don't pretend like this isn't your life too." She turned, walked toward the elevator, spine straight, tears threatening. She didn't look back. Cairo didn't go back to the meeting. The boardroom emptied around him like fog burning off in sunlight, but he stayed frozen. The image of those 2 little girls burned behind his eyes. He didn't touch the chair. He didn't blink. The only thing he did was stare at the crease left on the table where Selene had laid the photo. His team whispered around him, waiting for instructions that never came. Eventually they left him alone. The silence was unbearable. By midnight he was pacing his penthouse. The city buzzed beneath him, horns, motion, life, but none of it reached him. Selene's voice kept playing in his head. "Tell me they don't look like you." He pulled up photos from 6 years ago, screenshots from their old trips, blurry images taken in stolen moments, her leaning into him on a balcony, him brushing a strand of hair behind her ear on a beach. Her laugh, his stare. Then he opened her old profile. It had been dormant for years, until now. 2 new posts, both from earlier that month. The twins, not full-face shots, just glimpses. One laughing with a stuffed unicorn, the other painting in the sun. But even that was enough. They had his jawline, his exact brow shape. One of them even tilted her head like he did when he was lost in thought. The ache started in his chest and worked its way into his throat. For the first time in years, he felt something that wasn't calculated. He felt ashamed. He sat down at his desk and opened a folder titled Selene M. Yes, he had one. Yes, it was years old. Old background searches, a scanned passport, employment records from her ballet school. He'd looked her up a few times over the years, quietly, privately, but he never acted. Tonight, that ended. He picked up his phone and called a name he hadn't used since his father's funeral. "Eric, I need surveillance. Brooklyn. Name, Selene Moore. She has 2 girls. I need full detail. I don't care what it costs. The report came in by sunrise. His private investigator didn't even call first. The file just appeared, encrypted, time-stamped, thorough. He opened it with trembling fingers. Every page pulled at something he had buried long ago. Photos, school records, pediatric visits, handwriting samples, eyewitness accounts from neighbors, teachers describing how the girls both lit up when their mother picked them up from school. One quote stood out. They talk about their mommy like she's a superhero. They never mention a dad. Cairo leaned back in his chair, but the weight of the truth kept him from breathing properly. They were his. There was no denying it now, and he had laughed in her face. He could still see her standing there, shoulders hunched, fingers shaking, eyes begging for help but never pity. She had come to him out of desperation, not weakness, and he responded with pride. No, with cruelty. He hadn't just failed her, he had failed them. He stood, walked to the floor-to-ceiling window overlooking the city. None of it meant anything. Not the skyline, not the accolades, not the empire he'd spent a decade building. He could lose every cent and still never pay for what he had let walk away. He had spent years convincing himself that silence meant closure, that her absence was proof she wasn't worth the chase. But that wasn't the truth. The truth was, he hadn't been strong enough to face her, not after what his mother said, not after what the board implied, not after he started believing the lies himself. He pulled out his phone again, canceled today's meetings, but sir, all of them. He grabbed his coat. One last glance around the office, sleek walls, untouched books, cold marble. All of it lifeless. He walked out without a second thought. No driver, no escort, no plan beyond one thing. Find Selene, find his daughters, and fix what he broke. The studio hadn't changed. Cairo stood in the doorway, hands in his coat pockets, watching through the narrow glass panel. Dim lighting, scuffed floors, mirrors clouded with fingerprints. The space smelled of chalk, sweat, and dreams that refused to die. Selene moved slowly across the floor, no audience, no music. Her hair was loose, sticking to her neck. Her feet were bare, her eyes swollen, but still, she danced. Not with elegance, not with fire, with ache. Each step looked like a plea to feel normal, to forget, even if only for seconds, that her world had caved in. Cairo didn't move until she stumbled. Her knees buckled mid-turn, hands clutching the air for balance. She didn't fall, but she gasped sharply, bracing herself against the mirror. He pushed the door open without a word. She turned at the sound, startled, eyes wide, their gaze locked. He didn't speak right away, just removed his coat and crossed the room, closing the space between them. Then, in one slow motion, he draped the coat over her shoulders. She didn't stop him. She just stared. "I'm sorry," he said quietly. Still, she didn't speak. "I saw the photos," he added. "The reports. There's no doubt." Silence again. Then, barely above a whisper, he said, "We'll get them back." Her hands clutched the coat a little tighter. She looked away, blinking fast. "You laughed," she finally said. "I hated myself the second I did." She closed her eyes. He waited. "I don't trust you," she whispered. "I don't expect you to—" Another beat passed. Then her voice softened. "But I need help. I'm here." They sat on the floor, backs against the mirror. No more accusations, just breathing. Selene pulled out a worn notebook filled with sketches, addresses, and scribbled patterns. Amira never did anything without planning. He plays games. He leaves trails. Cairo opened his tablet, pulled up surveillance records, street cams, pings from parked vehicles in her area the week before. "You know his behavior," he said. "You have the reach." Their eyes met again. This wasn't romance. Not yet. But it was beginning. If this story is pulling on your heartstrings, show some love. Smash that like button and share it with someone who needs a good cry. The hotel room was modest. 2 chairs by the window, 1 queen bed, dim lamps, thick curtains. Cairo insisted on something discreet. Low profile. Quiet. Selene tossed her duffel by the wall and sank into the chair without a word. Cairo stood at the foot of the bed, still in his dress shirt, sleeves rolled up, the top buttons undone. His watch blinked with silent alerts he ignored. "You can take the bed," he said. She gave a tired half-smile. "We've shared tighter spaces." His chest rose slowly. "It's not about space, I know." For the next hour they worked. Selene walked him through Amiran's patterns, the phone calls, the strange car outside her building, the security footage that caught a glimpse of someone who looked like one of Amiran's old enforcers. Cairo traced that man through databases, matched license plates, cross-referenced cell towers, and began to build a map. The pieces were connecting faster now, clearer, but under the surface, something else was moving between them. At one point, Selene reached for his tablet. Their hands brushed, and she pulled back fast. Cairo noticed. He didn't comment. Instead, he walked to the mini fridge and returned with a bottle of water, handing it to her without speaking. She took it. Their eyes met. It was a glance full of history, of what was broken, of what might still remain. Later that night, the room had quieted. Selene stood by the window in an oversized hotel robe, watching the skyline in the distance, the outline of the city she once thought she'd raise her daughters in, the city she had fought to survive in. She didn't turn. But she didn't move away. "You're not who I remember," she whispered. "I'm not proud of who I was." He stepped beside her, close enough for her to feel the warmth of him. She glanced at him, voice soft. "I don't know if I'm strong enough to forgive you." The silence between them wasn't empty anymore. It was heavy, safe. Selene looked back out the window and whispered, "Then don't leave. Not again. I'm not going anywhere." The hotel balcony was quiet. Midnight passed without notice. The city below was alive in distant murmurs, but up here, time had softened. The air was cool enough to raise goosebumps on Selene's arms. She didn't cover them. She stood barefoot on the stone, the hotel robe loose around her, holding a steaming mug Cairo had handed her minutes before. Chamomile. She hadn't asked. He just knew. Behind her, the room was dim. Cairo had turned off the lights when she stepped outside, giving her space, but she hadn't asked him to leave. He joined her now, slow and unassuming, leaning against the railing a few inches away. Not close enough to crowd her, just close enough to matter. Neither spoke at first. "You ever think about what we could have been?" Selene asked, eyes still fixed on the dark skyline. He answered after a long pause. "Every day." She turned slightly. "You didn't act like it. I know." Her fingers curled around the mug. "You let me walk away, pregnant, alone. I didn't know. You didn't ask." He swallowed hard. "I thought I was doing the right thing. The board was already circling. My mother made threats, said you'd destroy everything I'd built." Her voice didn't waver. "She looked me in the face and said I was disposable." Cairo's shoulders stiffened. "She never told me she said that." Selene exhaled slowly. "Would it have changed anything?" He didn't answer. Then, softly, he said, "I was scared." She looked at him, scared that I wasn't enough, that I'd pull you into my mess, that I'd become my father. Selene set the mug down. She took a step closer. "I never stopped loving you," she said. Cairo didn't answer with words. He stepped in, closer now, and lifted his hand to her face, brushing a stray curl behind her ear the way he used to. Slowly, reverently, like if he moved too fast, she'd vanish. Her eyes fluttered shut, and then his forehead touched hers, not urgent, not hungry, just there, present. Her breath hitched as she whispered, "It still hurts. I know, but I wanted you to be the one who stayed. I should have been." A tear slipped down her cheek. He caught it with his thumb. Then his lips touched hers, soft, barely there, but she leaned in, and that was all he needed. It wasn't a kiss full of fire. It wasn't wild or rushed. It was safe, like coming home to something you thought you lost forever. Selene reached up, her fingers grazing the side of his neck. He deepened the kiss, not in speed, but in stillness, the kind of connection that says more than words ever could. When they pulled apart, their foreheads still touching, Cairo whispered, "I would give up everything for one more chance to protect what we made." She nodded, just once, and then she led him back inside. The room was quiet, no music, no light but the street glow slipping between curtains. They didn't undress quickly. It wasn't about urgency. It was about permission, about letting hands replace apologies, about letting skin remember what words forgot. She laid beside him after, her head on his chest, fingers drawing invisible shapes there. He held her like something precious, fragile, not because she was weak, but because he had been too blind to see her strength before. "You could have told me," she said softly. "I'm telling you now," he whispered, "and I'm not leaving again." The address came through Cairo's encrypted channel just after 2 a.m. A private camera feed picked up a familiar vehicle entering a stretch of woods upstate, one Cairo's team had flagged days earlier. The footage was grainy, but the shape of a small head pressed to the backseat window made Selene stop breathing. Mira or Lyra, maybe both. The farmhouse was isolated, 2 hours north of the city. Fenced off, no close neighbors, a perfect place to hide something, or someone, who wasn't supposed to be found. Cairo pulled the car onto the road without hesitation. Selene climbed in beside him, already tying her hair back, checking her phone for the 100th time. "You should stay in the car," he said after a long silence. Selene turned to him wide-eyed. "You're not serious. I can't protect you and find them at the same time. I'm not asking you to protect me, Selene. I'm their mother." Her voice didn't tremble. He looked at her. She was scared, but her hands didn't shake. Her voice didn't crack. She wasn't the girl who'd danced for him in silk years ago. She was the woman who'd raised their daughters alone and survived. "Okay," he said. "We go in together." They parked a mile out and moved on foot, cutting through brush, stepping over broken fencing. The house came into view, lit only by a faint glow inside the front window. Selene's heart pounded in her ears. They reached the porch without a word. Cairo turned to her, taking both her hands in his. "If anything happens—" "No," she whispered, squeezing his fingers. "You don't get to finish that sentence." He exhaled, pulled her close, pressed his lips to her forehead like it might shield her from what came next. And then, he pushed the door open. The moment they stepped inside, Cairo's instincts kicked in. The hallway was narrow, cold, quiet. Selene stayed close behind him, her fingers gripping the back of his jacket as they moved through the darkness. The air smelled of sweat and gasoline. There was a low hum, maybe a generator in another room. Then a door creaked open at the end of the hall. 2 men stepped out. Armed, Cairo moved first, a punch to the jaw, another to the ribs. One dropped. The second lunged at Selene. She ducked just in time. Cairo tackled him into the wall. A struggle. Heavy fists. Grunts. A gun clattered to the floor. Selene kicked it toward Cairo. He didn't hesitate. One warning shot into the floor. "Where are they?" he growled. The man froze. Upstairs. Locked room. Second door on the right. Cairo grabbed Selene's hand and they ran. The stairs creaked under their weight. She reached the door first, heart in her throat. A lock. Heavy and rusted. Cairo slammed into it with his shoulder. Once, twice, 3 times. It gave way. And there they were, Mira and Lyra, huddled together on a cot, tear-streaked, clutching a stuffed toy between them. "Mommy!" they screamed. Selene collapsed to her knees, pulling them both into her arms, kissing every inch of their faces, weeping. Cairo turned, watching, guard up, gun raised. And then, footsteps, a door slammed downstairs, voices shouting, more men. He turned to Selene. "Stay with them." She nodded, still sobbing. He stepped into the hall. A shot rang out. The bullet caught him in the shoulder, spinning him into the wall. Blood. Pain tore through him, but he stayed upright, firing once, twice, sending the attackers running back down the stairs. Selene screamed his name. He stumbled back into the room, face pale, hand pressed to the wound. She caught him before he fell. He looked at her, blinking through the blur. Mira and Lyra clung to his side. "You're bleeding," Selene choked out. He smiled weakly. "You saved them," she said. He shook his head, his voice barely audible. "No, you saved me too." The morning light poured gently through the kitchen window, casting soft gold across the counters and Cairo's shoulders as he fumbled with a spatula. Bandages peeked from beneath the sleeve of his t-shirt, fresh white against healing skin. He flipped a pancake, lopsided, slightly burnt, and looked down proudly at the pan like it was a masterpiece. "Daddy burned it again," Mira giggled from the table. "I did not," Cairo said, mock offended. "I crisped it, for flavor." Lyra leaned over and whispered loudly to her sister, "He's still learning." Selene watched them from the doorway, arms crossed, barefoot, smiling. It had only been 3 weeks since the farmhouse. 3 weeks since blood and terror were replaced by bedtime stories and pancake mornings. 3 weeks since Cairo stopped being a ghost from the past and started being home. He turned as he heard her laugh. "You should be resting," she teased, walking into the kitchen. "I'm fine. Doctor said I can make mediocre breakfast without risking my life." She took the spatula from him gently. "Let me show you how the real chef does it." He didn't argue. He just leaned against the counter, watching her. Same woman, new light. She still danced late into the evening, but now it was different. No longer to survive. She danced for joy again, for the twins, for herself, for them. That evening he waited outside her studio. She stepped out in her practice clothes, cheeks flushed from rehearsal. "Walk with me?" he asked, offering his hand. She took it. They walked to the shore, quiet, warm wind brushing past them, the twins a few steps ahead chasing sea foam. Cairo reached into his jacket. "I never told you this," he said softly, "but I kept it." He handed her a small box. She opened it and gasped. Inside lay a worn ballet slipper, one she had lost backstage the night they met. He had kept it all this time. She looked up at him, speechless. He dropped to one knee, not for tradition, not for attention, for meaning. "I didn't buy a ring," he said. "I couldn't, because nothing I could buy means more than what you gave me. This was the day you danced into my life." Tears filled her eyes. "And I nearly lost it all," he continued. "I can't undo the pain, but I will never stop choosing you again." She dropped to her knees and threw her arms around him. "Yes," she whispered into his chest. "Yes, 1,000 times yes." A week later, the four of them walked barefoot down the beach, hand in hand. Mira carried a tiny bouquet of seashells. Lyra wore a crown of sun-dried flowers Selene had braided earlier that morning. Cairo held Selene's hand like it was his anchor, his lifeline. They weren't perfect. They didn't need to be. They were whole. Moral lesson: redemption isn't given. It's earned, one act of love at a time. If this story touched your heart, subscribe for more life-changing stories right here on Mr. Ross' Story Trail. And comment below, what's the greatest redemption you've ever seen in real life? We'd love to hear it.